They took the duplex on Elgin Street. They took the Silverado. They took his son, and they did it the way these things are always done, in a downtown office with a paralegal who handed him a pen without looking up. 6 weeks later, a copy of Canadian Business sat open on a kitchen counter in Halifax, and the woman holding it turned from the face on the cover to the man standing in the doorway in a paint-stained flannel shirt and understood, all at once, that she had made a calculation she could not take back. Sawyer Dench did not say a word. He had not driven 4 hours to say a word. They had taken everything the paperwork could reach. Nobody had bothered to ask him what the paperwork had missed. $340. Sawyer counted it on the passenger seat of the truck he was borrowing from his brother, because the Silverado was gone. And counting it once hadn't made it feel like enough, so he counted it again and it still wasn't. The papers had been filed in February. The duplex on Elgin Street, the one he had spent 2 summers gutting and rebuilding from the studs out, the one with the crooked back step he'd promised himself he'd fix before the snow came and never had, that belonged to Diane now. The Silverado belonged to Diane. The court had awarded her primary custody of their son and given Sawyer supervised access on alternating weekends, with exchanges to happen in a parking lot off Barrington, like a handoff between strangers. The word supervised sat in the order the way a splinter sits in a palm. You don't notice it until you move. He didn't contest it in the room. There was nothing left in the room to contest. Diane's lawyer had a folder 3 inches thick, and Sawyer's was a man he'd found on a Tuesday for a Thursday hearing, and the math had not been complicated. What Diane did not take was the workshop. She had walked past it every winter they were together, the way you walk past the utility room. Head turned slightly away. She called the thing inside it what she had always called it, his father's mess. A rolling tool chest the color of dried mustard. A Makita drill with a strip chuck she said needed throwing out. A green binder held shut with 2 elastics. A shelf of material samples she said were garbage waiting for a bin. Take your scrap, she told him. So he did. He loaded the tool chest into his brother's truck, with both arms the way you carry something heavier than its weight, because it had belonged to his father, and his father had been gone 3 years, and the chest still smelled faintly of sawdust and linseed oil, in a way that did not make any physical sense but was true nonetheless. Tremblay Woodcraft on Agricola had been shuttered since a lease dispute the previous spring. The sign was still up. Half the letters had faded. Henri Tremblay was 68 and kept the key on his ring out of habit, the way old men keep things they are not ready to let go of. He looked at Sawyer through the shop window for a long moment before he came out to the parking lot. Your dad built my jointer table in 2006, Henri said. Wouldn't take a cent for it. Said a proper bench was the difference between a craftsman and a man with tools. He tucked his hands in his jacket pockets. $200 a month. You sweep up after yourself. Sawyer moved in that weekend. He slept on an army cot beside a bandsaw that hadn't run in 14 months, and woke to the smell of cold concrete and old cedar. On his second Sunday there, his son came for his first visit, walked in holding a drawing on the back of a pizza box lid. Eli was 9. He had drawn the shop in marker, the big roll door and the skylights, and a stick figure at the bench, and he had printed in careful letters across the top, Dad's workshop. Sawyer taped it to the face of the tool chest and stood looking at it for longer than he meant to. The woman from the province came on a Tuesday. She introduced herself as Pel Navarro, independent assessor, contracted through the Nova Scotia Department of Community Services, and she said it the way you read a notice posted in a lobby. She had a clipboard, a form on it, and a manner that suggested she had seen every version of this before. She measured the distance from the cot to the exit. She asked where the child would sleep. She asked whether there was adequate heat, whether there was a working smoke detector, where meals would be prepared. There'll be a proper setup by next month, Sawyer said. She wrote that down without looking up. And what about income? Working on it. She wrote that down too. She had a file that described him in 3 words. Unemployed, arrears pending. She had no information that contradicted the file, and Sawyer gave her none. He answered what she asked and left the rest alone. And when she left, he went back to the bench, and the shop went quiet around him. She came back the following Tuesday, 20 minutes early, and found the roll door already up. Eli was there, sitting on an overturned milk crate, while Sawyer showed him how to read the grain on a piece of white oak before you cut it. The shop was warmer than it had been. A salvage propane heater was running in the corner, and there was a sleeping bag on the cot and a narrow camp mattress beside it, set up with a pillow and a flannel blanket Sawyer had pressed flat at the corners. Pell set her bag down and started the walkthrough she was paid to do. The exits, the smoke detector, the fire extinguisher that had not been there last week. At the tool chest she lifted the pizza box drawing to see what was behind it. Under it was the green binder with the 2 elastics. She almost set it back. She wasn't sure afterward why she didn't. The binder was full of material specifications, engineering tolerances, supply chain correspondence, and at the back, behind a divider labeled simply filings, 3 documents in clear plastic sleeves. Canadian intellectual property registrations. She read the top line twice before she understood what she was looking at. Inventor Sawyer Dench. There were others beneath it. A modular panel joining system. An installation method for mass timber construction that reduced on-site labor by 1/3. A thermal performance specification for a passive envelope. Detail she didn't fully understand and didn't need to fully understand to know what it was. It was not the kind of document that belonged in a file that called this man unemployed. It was not the kind of document that belonged anywhere near the description she had been handed. The story she had been working from quietly began to come apart in her hands. She did not say so. She turned, and across the shop, Sawyer had Eli's hand flat on the surface of the oak plank. "Feel that?" he said. "That ridge running diagonal. That's the grain telling you something. You go against it, the wood fights you the whole way. You go with it, it practically cuts itself." Ellie ran his fingers back and forth over it with the seriousness of someone who has been trusted with real information. Sawyer didn't look up at Pell. He didn't gesture toward the binder. He didn't say a word about what was in it, did not reach for the one sentence that would have answered every question in her file and put the whole matter to rest before dinner. He showed his son how to listen to a piece of wood. Pell stood there holding her clipboard at her side, and she realized she had stopped writing some time ago, and she wasn't entirely sure when. Her phone buzzed. A message from her supervisor flagged priority. The Ansty file is being moved forward. Petitioner's Counsel has requested expedited disposition. Have your recommendation ready by end of week. She read it twice. She didn't yet know there were 11 days left before something she couldn't see would close and change the whole picture. She knew only that someone had reached into a scheduling system and pulled a date forward, and that people did not do that unless there was a clock somewhere they badly did not want anyone watching. The thing about pressure applied slowly is that nobody feels the ground shift. You go to sleep in one place and wake up in another, and you spend a week convincing yourself you simply drifted. Sawyer understood that now, looking back. 14 years earlier, he and a partner named Vince Ouellette had started a construction technology company out of a rented unit in Dartmouth, 2 tradespeople with a building method nobody in the industry had seen yet. Sawyer held the patents because Sawyer had drawn them, everyone, in this same green binder, on nights when Eli was asleep and the rest of the house had gone quiet. Then the company grew, and Diane's work took her to Toronto 3 weeks out of 4. And someone had to be in Halifax for school drop-offs and hockey practices, and the orthodontist appointments that seemed to multiply on their own. So Sawyer stepped back from the day-to-day operations in the spring of what felt at the time like the company's most uncertain year. His equity stayed locked in a founder's agreement, illiquid, unusable, worth nothing you could put in a court filing. On paper he became exactly what the custody assessment called him, nothing. Diane had a calendar in her head he never saw. She filed in March, 11 months before the agreement's vesting cliff, when his shares would unlock and be assignable. She refinanced the duplex into her name alone in April, citing a spousal income contribution discrepancy in the original mortgage application, which was technically accurate and strategically precise. She took the title to the Silverado in July. She had the interim custody order by October. Every step landed in the right sequence, and every sequence landed before the one number that would have changed everything became public. He had thought it was bad timing. It was the only timing it had ever been. The town adjusted to the story she was telling. His regular lumber supplier in Bedford stopped returning calls without explanation. A contractor he'd worked with for 8 years suddenly found he didn't have room on his schedule. People he recognized from Eli's school looked at him with a particular expression, the careful one people wear when they've heard something they can't quite repeat. He spent what he had left on materials and kept the work under a canvas tarp in the back corner of the shop. Because a man living on a cot in a shuttered wood shop, who was buying engineered lumber and precision fasteners in bulk, looked like exactly the kind of instability the file already said he was. Diane tightened access through texts that arrived on a schedule she controlled. She moved a Sunday handoff to a 2-hour window on a Saturday that barely covered the drive. She wrote that Eli had a tournament, that Eli had a project due, that it was simply easier this way. Sawyer read each one standing at the bench and wrote back in plain, even sentences that said he understood and confirmed the time. He did not write what he wanted to write. Instead, he wrote Eli a letter by hand, on the back of a material spec sheet, because it was what he had nearby, about a piece of white oak and what it teaches you when you learn to read it right. He did not put one word about Diane in it. Pell came back for what she called a supplementary visit. She stood just inside the roll door with her clipboard against her hip rather than in front of her, which was a small difference and not a small difference. "What are you planning to build this on?" she asked. It wasn't on her form, it was the question underneath the form. Sawyer wiped his hands on a shop rag. He didn't quote a number. He didn't make a promise. He pulled the tarp back from the corner and let her see the prototype on the workbench. The panel system, dry-fitted and clamped, with the joint detail he'd spent 2 years refining. Cedar pine composite, the seams tight as a cabinet. "On this," he said, "and on what I know how to do with these." He held up his hands, sawdust on the knuckles. The old scar across the right palm from a chisel slip in his 20s. She looked at the work for longer than the visit required. She left without writing anything in the notes column, which told him more than writing would have. Vince came after midnight on a Thursday, parking on the street and walking across the gravel, wearing a jacket that looked wrong against the cold and the dark. He had not been in the same room as Sawyer in nearly 2 years, and he stood at the edge of the roll door with something careful in the way he held himself, the hesitation of a person who has something to say and has been rehearsing it in the car. "It's closing," Vince said. "Or it's close enough that I drove from Halifax to say it to your face instead of a voicemail. The Meridian Group wants the whole platform, licensing, production rights, the joint system, the envelope detail, all of it. National rollout for mass timber residential. They want both founders on the announcement. The Globe is running a feature. Independent inventor turns modular building inside out, comes back from nothing to license the method reshaping Canadian housing construction." He laughed once, without humor in it. "That's you, Sawyer. After all of this, in a shuttered woodshop in the north end of Halifax, that is still you." Sawyer stood with his hands at his sides. "When does it close?" 11 days. The feature publishes the morning the deal goes public." Vince's face changed, the lightness dropping out of it. "And here is the part I needed to say in person. Until that morning, I cannot confirm a single thing. The NDA is airtight. If I verify your equity stake, the valuation, one number, before the announcement, the buyer has the right to walk. And 11 years of what we built dies in a conference room in Toronto, and I can't undo that." He spread his hands, open and empty. "I drove here because you should hear it from someone who knows you. I drove here because there is nothing else I am allowed to do, not yet, and possibly not in time." Sawyer understood what Vince was saying, and he understood the thing underneath it, the same way he could hear what a piece of wood was telling him before the saw touched it. There was a custody hearing coming. There was a number sitting 11 days away that would change how a judge understood this file in about 45 seconds flat. He could have his son back under the same roof inside a week. All it would cost was the deal Vince had given 11 years to close, and the man standing in front of him, and the quiet truth of his work converted into a weapon he swung for himself. "We don't say it," Sawyer said. Vince looked at him for a moment. "You could lose him waiting. You know that? You could do the right thing and lose your kid over it." "I could lose him any number of ways," Sawyer said. "That's not one I'd be able to sit with afterward." Pell had left a file folder on the corner of the bench and had come back for it. She was standing in the gravel outside when she saw a man, in a good jacket, leave a woodshop at 20 past midnight, saw the way the two of them stood at the roll door before the other man left, a handshake that held a beat too long to be about nothing. She stood in the dark and registered that there was a story here, much larger than the one in her file. Her instinct, 15 years of fieldwork filed down to something she trusted more than most things, told her she was behind on something. It also told her she wanted to be behind on it, that she wanted this man to be what she was beginning to suspect he was. And she made herself stand there in the cold and remind herself, the way she had trained herself to, that wanting a particular outcome was how you read a file wrong. She read the file again the next morning, the original assessment, the one that had set everything in motion. She read it the way you reread a map when you have the growing suspicion you took a wrong turn an hour back. It had been completed in 9 days. Her own assessments took 5 to 6 weeks because that was how long honesty required. The 2 mandatory parent interviews were checked complete with no supporting notes. The home study had no photographs, though photographs were required by the department's own guidelines. The collateral contacts, the school, the family doctor, Eli's hockey coach, were all marked unreachable on the first attempt. All of them, never followed up. It was the work of someone moving quickly on purpose. And Pell had been doing this long enough to know that quickly on purpose meant someone had not wanted a thorough record to exist before something else happened. She drove out to the house on Elgin Street on a Wednesday afternoon. She sat across from Diane at the kitchen table, asked her questions in the order the form required, kept her voice even throughout. Diane answered everything smoothly, the practiced ease of someone who had been ready for this conversation for a long time, until Pell asked why the original assessment had omitted the collateral interviews. The smoothness went very thin. "I wouldn't know anything about how the department manages its own process," Diane said. She set her coffee down with a deliberate hand. "But I do know that there are people with quite a long memory for how these files turn out, professionally speaking. You'd want to keep that in mind." She said it quietly. The door closed without slamming. Pell wrote nothing in her notes. She didn't need to write down something she was not going to forget. Eli was in the hallway, and he came to the kitchen doorway the way children approach strangers, all caution, and then suddenly, none. "Are you the one who decides where I live?" he asked. "I'm the one who helps the judge understand things," Pell said. Eli considered this. He had the seriousness of a child who has been living inside a difficult situation long enough to understand that it is difficult. "My dad can fix anything," he said. "He fixed a sparrow once when I was 6. It had a broken wing. He made a splint from a popsicle stick and some electrical tape and kept it in a shoebox in the shoebox until it could fly again. He looked down at his socks, then back up. And he never says anything bad about my mom, even when I ask him to. He just says we both love you, and that's the only part that matters. He says it every time, exactly the same. Children don't know which of their sentences carry the weight." Pell carried that one out to her car and sat with her hands in her lap for a while before she was ready to drive. That evening, pulling the original assessment from the system to run a clean copy into her working file, she noticed the access log open alongside it. She almost closed it. She read it instead. The file had been accessed 14 times in the past 6 weeks, edited on 3 occasions, by an account she could not match to anyone in her office or in the department's field staff directory. Someone outside the system had been inside it. Someone had been changing it while she worked the case from the outside, in good faith, in the way she always worked. The woman who came to the shop on a Friday morning was in her mid-60s, with Diane's jaw and none of Diane's ease. She had parked on the street and waited on the gravel for the better part of an hour before Pell arrived. She held a manila envelope flat against her chest with both hands, the way you hold something that has already cost you to carry and will cost you more to hand over. "My name is Beverly Crane," she said. "Diane's mother." She said it steadily, the way you say a thing you have been deciding whether to say for a long time. "You'll want to read this, or you won't want to, but either way." Inside the envelope was a financial disclosure document dated 3 years back, showing the Dentulet equity stake by name, with a projected valuation range at the vesting cliff. There was a set of printed text messages, and there was a single handwritten note on a piece of notepaper in a compact, deliberate hand. The text ran between Diane and Beverly from the February before the filing. One of them read, "The cliff is next January. After that it's marital property and he's sitting on 8 figures. Before that he's a man with a tool chest and a debt load. We move now, Mom. I've known for 2 years this was coming. Timing is the whole thing." The handwritten note was from a man named Gareth Coster. Pell recognized the name. He had done the original assessment. He ran a small private practice in Dartmouth that had been operating under a provincial service contract for 11 years. The note made plain, in 9 words, what Beverly had understood when she found it. File clean, file fast. The contract renews in March. Beverly pressed the envelope into Pell's hands and folded Pell's fingers around it. "She is my daughter," Beverly said. "I have watched her for 2 years take apart a man I have known to be decent, using information she gathered while he was busy believing the marriage was something worth saving, and I watched her put a child in the middle of it." Her voice went flat and even. "I cannot sit across from that at Christmas and pretend I don't know what I know. Whatever it costs me to give you that, it is already less than what it has cost me to carry it." Pell had spent 15 years in the careful space between parties, exact, neutral, a reader of files and nothing else. She was not neutral now. She knew which side of this she was on. She also knew what standing on it might do to a career she had built, on the discipline of never standing anywhere. She drove to the shop to tell Sawyer. It was not a scheduled visit, and they both understood that as soon as she came through the roll door. He poured 2 mugs of coffee from the camp percolator on the bench. They sat on stools and the coffee was cold between them, while the shop settled into the quiet particular to late afternoons in winter. Neither of them named the thing that was in the room with them. It was enough that they both knew it was there. The formal objection came through proper channels, as these things always do, dressed in the right clothes. A motion requesting that the assessor be removed from the file for conflict of interest, citing her unscheduled visits, her contact with a family member of the petitioner, and what the filing described, in language chosen by someone paid to choose language, as her evident personal investment in the respondent's outcome. It was signed by a firm that did regular work for Coster's supervising body. Clipped to the back, as though it were an afterthought, was a paragraph noting that the independent assessor's service contract with the department was scheduled for review in the spring. It was a notice of consequence dressed as a procedural concern. It did not need to say more. Sawyer heard about it because Beverly heard about it. He stood in the shop with the phone in his hand and understood, with a weight that sat behind his sternum and did not move, that Pell was being asked to pay for standing close to his case. He got in the truck and drove to her office and waited in the lot, the way Beverly had waited in his. When she came out to the parking lot, he said it before she could speak. "Step back," he said. "Tell them whatever they need to hear. Recuse yourself and let it go. I'll find another way through this. I always find another route." He looked at her steadily. "I am not going to be the thing that cost you 30 years of work. I won't let that happen." Pell looked back at him. "You have spent this whole time," she said, "building shelters over everyone else's head before your own, your partner's deal. Your son's name kept out of your mouth when saying it would have won you the whole case in a single sentence. And now mine." She shook her head, slow and deliberate. "No, I read files true. That's the job. This one I am going to read true, and I am going to put my name at the bottom of it, and then the spring can do whatever it does." She filed the new recommendation the following morning. It rested on what she had seen with her own eyes and measured with her own tools, and on the access logs, and on what Beverly's envelope contained, and it recommended the full restoration of the father's residential and decision-making rights, pending the modification hearing. She signed it. Her hand was steady. That week, Sawyer fixed her car. She had mentioned once, in passing, during what was supposed to be a file visit, that the rear wiper on her Subaru had been streaking for 2 months and she kept meaning to deal with it. He had not mentioned it again. He looked up the model, ordered the right blade, and had it sorted on a Saturday morning, along with the loose driver's door seal she probably hadn't noticed yet. He didn't tell her. He left the car as he found it in the lot, wipers sorted, door seal pressed back flush, and tucked a folded note under the wiper blade. It said, "Rear wiper was skipping a bit, sorted it out." The door seal on the driver's side was starting to lift, pressed it back, should hold through the winter. She found it Monday morning and stood with her hand on the door handle for a moment before she got in. The hearing and the announcement were going to fall in the same week. Sawyer could feel both of them now, 2 separate clocks, and he did not know which would strike first or what the room would look like when it did. Diane's lawyer pushed the hearing forward a second time, harder, spending the kind of leverage that rescheduling a family court date requires, until it landed on a Tuesday morning 2.5 weeks ahead of where it had been. The intention was clear, and it was simple. Close the file while it still said nothing, while the man was still only a man in a borrowed shop on a month-to-month arrangement. Before one word about what he actually was could reach a public record, they did not know, because they had never thought to ask the right question about him. That they had just set the hearing for the same morning the rest of the country would find out who he was. The night before, Sawyer was not thinking about the hearing. He was thinking about the panel system under the tarp, the joinery finally dialed in after 2 years of iteration. Every dimension checked, every tolerance held. He was thinking about Eli beside him on the milk crate in his winter jacket, because the shop held the cold at night, and the heater only did so much. "You want to put it together?" Sawyer asked. Eli looked at him the way a child looks at a parent who has just handed them something real. Sawyer talked him through fitting the first panel into the second, the tongue-and-groove joint detail, the way the tolerances were cut so that the pieces wanted to find each other. Eli pressed them together, both hands flat, and felt the joint seat with a low, clean click. He looked up. "It works," Eli said. "It works," Sawyer said. He held that moment the way he had held the pizza box drawing before he taped it to the chest, carefully with both hands, in a place where it wouldn't blow away. Across the city, a press release was being cued. A photographer's caption was being locked to a layout. The cover of Canadian Business, a man in a flannel shirt at a workbench in an empty shop in Halifax, was going to print in the morning, and there was nothing left that money could do about it. The courtroom in the Halifax Law Courts building was small and bright with fluorescent light, and the story Diane's lawyer told inside it was the same story the file had always told. Worn smooth from use, unemployed, unstable, a man without a fixed residence who had been consistently unable to demonstrate reliable income or a stable environment for a child of primary school age. They had photographs of the shop, the cot, the tarp, the camp mattress, framed to look like disorder rather than work. They were reading the original assessment into the record when the phone started going. A slow ripple. First one clerk's phone, then another, then a murmur from the gallery as the people who had not silenced theirs registered the alert coming through. The deal had been announced at 9 o'clock. Meridian Group acquires landmark mass timber technology platform in $340 million licensing agreement. The co-inventor, a Nova Scotia tradesman, photographed at his workbench in a shuttered Halifax woodshop, credited with the core innovations driving the deal. The back door of the courtroom opened. Beverly Crane walked the full length of the room and took the stand, and did not look at her daughter once the entire way up. She submitted the texts, the financial disclosure, and the note in Gareth Coster's handwriting, and she said, under oath, in a voice that did not waver, what her daughter had known, and precisely when she had known it, and what had been arranged, and by whom. Vince followed her, the NDA having dissolved at 9 that morning, and he confirmed under oath what Sawyer Dench had been, and had always quietly been, while a courthouse full of people sat with phones face down on their laps and pretended not to have read the news alert. Diane was not looking at any of it. She was looking at the copy of the magazine someone had placed on the table between the parties. At the tool chest, visible in the background of the photo, the mustard yellow one with the worn handles. At the green binder open on the bench beside it, the one she had called garbage waiting for a bin. She understood in the particular and complete way you understands something when the understanding is too late to change anything, that the thing she had spent 2 years carefully dismantling had been holding up everything she'd taken. Sawyer didn't stand to say anything until the judge asked whether he wished to be heard. Then he stood. "I didn't want the duplex," he said. "I didn't want the truck. They could have had all of it, every board and every bolt, and I would have signed the papers myself. I wanted my son. That's what I came here for. That's all I've wanted the whole time. Nothing in that magazine changes a word of it." The court restored joint custody, full and equal, effective that day, and ordered a full review of the original assessment that everyone in the room understood would end at least one career before the year was out. Across the aisle, Diane's lawyer was leaning close to her ear, and whatever he was saying, she had no answer for it. With the file closed, the thing that had been standing between Sawyer and the woman assigned to assess him simply wasn't there anymore. He looked across the courtroom and found Pell already looking at him, and neither of them said anything. And the look lasted a beat longer than looks between strangers last, and that was the whole of it. and it was all it needed to be. Diane kept the duplex on Elgin Street and moved through its rooms in the way of a person who has finally understood the value of something now. That it belongs entirely to her, which is not the same thing as being glad you have it, and is, most of the time, the heavier thing to carry. Sawyer kept the shop. He didn't need it the way he had needed it. He could have bought the building, and the one beside it, and probably the one across the street. He kept it because he was a man who worked with his hands, and a number printed in a trade magazine does not change what a man is made of, only what the world is willing to see. He brought Henri Tremblay back to run the front counter and told him the rent was zero and the wage was real. And it came out, the way these things come out, that Sawyer had established a registered education savings plan in Eli's name on the day Eli was born. Money set aside from his portion of the founder's agreement, so that whatever happened to him, whatever the world did with his paperwork or his address or his file, his son would not be reduced to a line that said he came from nothing. Eli put a new drawing on the tool chest, 3 figures in marker this time, his father at the bench with a plane in his hand, himself in the middle, where he belonged, and a woman off to the side, slightly smaller, holding a folder, drawn with the careful attention a child gives to the people he has decided to keep track of. Below the drawing, the green binder lay open to a page his father had filled years before, the writing in pencil gone soft with time. And in the margin, in a hand Sawyer recognized from childhood, were 4 words his own father had written there. Good work outlasts everything. Pell came by on a Saturday, not for the province, not with a clipboard, without any of the things that had previously explained her presence. She knocked on the roll door frame, and Sawyer handed her a mug of coffee before she was fully inside, and this time it was hot, and she wrapped both hands around it. "Eli's in the back," he said. "He wants to show you the joint detail. Says you never got the full demonstration." "I didn't," Pell said. Neither of them said anything beyond that, and neither of them needed to. They stood in the open mouth of the shop with the cold Saturday morning behind them and the warm light of the space ahead, and the silence between them was the easy kind now, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. They took the duplex and the truck and Eli for a while, with paperwork and good lawyers, and a favor bought for the price of a contract renewal. But the thing that had actually mattered had never been on any document they touched. It had been in his hands the whole time, in a yellow tool chest and a green binder, and a boy who could press his palms to a joint and feel it seat. Sawyer had only ever been waiting for someone to read the file and then look past it. Here is the question, and it will not have one answer. If someone spent 2 years quietly taking everything they could reach, while you were busy believing the marriage was worth saving, and then watched you rebuild all of it from $340 and a chest of tools they called garbage, would you ever open the door to them again? Or would you let them live alone inside what they built? Tell me below. I read everyone. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. This story is a work of fiction. The names, characters, places, and events are entirely imagined. No real person is depicted or referenced. The emotional and legal realities within it are not invented. Coercive financial control within a marriage, the deliberate restructuring of assets ahead of a divorce filing, and custody disputes fought on the narrow ground of who appears more stable on paper occur in family courts across Canada every year. Often, to people who did not see it coming. If you or someone you know is navigating a separation or custody matter, please speak with a family law lawyer about your rights to matrimonial property and to your children. Free legal information is available through resources such as Legal Aid Nova Scotia and the Canadian Department of Justice Family Law Information pages. Knowing what is yours is not optional, it is how you keep it.